In the eyes of some media outlets and think tanks, the vast South China Sea isn't just blue, it's also gray.
China is waging aggressive gray zone warfare in the South China Sea.
But if you dig deeper into this gray zone, you might be surprised. There's a side of the story that the US and the Philippines won't admit. But first, what exactly is a gray zone?
As a phenomenon, the gray zone isn't something new. Gray zone tactics are the comprehensive use of military, diplomatic, narrative, and legislative methods to compete below the threshold of large-scale war.
The Cold War, for example, has been described as a 45-year-long gray zone struggle. But despite its history, the term gained traction after 2015, when the U.S. Special Operations Command issued a white paper on the gray zone.
Over the past decade or so, the popularity of the gray zone started with the United States. The West has essentially used the gray zone to target China, especially on the South China Sea issue, claiming that China is engaging in gray zone activities.
Take, for example, the incident in 2021, when Chinese fishing boats sought shelter from the weather near Nuojiao, a traditional fishing ground. U.S. and Philippine officials were quick to label them as maritime militia, despite a lack of evidence. If the lens of scrutiny is reversed, specific actions by the Philippines seem fishier.
In 2023 and 2024, they organized this civilian group called Atenito, mobilizing yachts and fishing boats into a large fleet to head toward China's Huangyandao. What's the purpose? To make a statement, to create hype, and if possible, to breach China's control and enter the lagoon. That's civilian action. Even if the China Coast Guard conducts law enforcement, it is challenging to handle.
For the Philippines, civilian vessels have served multiple purposes. Previously, they were deployed in resupply missions to a warship illegally grounded in Renaijiao. In a newly launched initiative, the Philippines even encouraged more fishing activities in waters near China's Huangyandao, posing risks in the flashpoint.
What are your fishermen really doing there? They're not there to fish. They're there to create conflicts. But what should China Coast Guard vessels do when they encounter these fishermen engaging in military-like activities? That's why this could significantly raise the risk of unintended maritime incidents.
The gray zone isn't just about physical actions, it's also a battle of narratives.
The current challenge the Philippines poses to China is primarily centered on gray zone activities. The Philippines cannot challenge China through sheer force, so they rely more on the so-called Transparency Initiative, claiming to expose China's activities.
According to analysts, the Transparency Initiative in question, launched after President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office, is a prime example of Washington and Manila's gray zone tactics. It blends on-site provocations with a widespread misinformation campaign, creating a spectacle to assert Manila's claims.
For every move on the sea by the Philippines, there is a screenplay written by external forces. The show is live-streamed by Western media, and the plot is invariably to smear China. People are not interested in watching the same performance again and again.
Experts say the U.S. involvement in gray zone competition against China is far more invasive than it appears.
For example, US P-8A reconnaissance aircraft are always present during confrontations in Renaijiao. The U.S.'s so-called Task Force Ayungin could help the Philippines plan its maritime operations. The U.S. is also training the Philippine Coast Guard. They are all part of the gray zone strategy.
One of their most successful tactics was perhaps the term gray zone itself.
U.S. and Western defense experts turn a blind eye to the grave gray zone confrontations that China faces, but constantly use the concept to accuse China. This is a highly unbalanced and hypocritical narrative.
So the next time you hear the term thrown around, it's worth asking, whose gray zone are we really talking about? Chen Yuan, CGTN, Beijing.